In Lab 4, we are going to learn more about some structured approach debugging. As part of this lab, we are going to install SQL Server 2005 Express Edition on Windows 2008 instance and then migrate that into Windows 2019. You will learn how to resolve third-party dependencies, COM plus related issues, and also you will try to resolve some permissions issues related to some files. So let's get started. I'm in my AWS console. So let's start the lab 4 machines. So that's all the instance that starts with lab 4 over here. If you completed the previous labs, make sure that you turn off those instances. So let's start the lab 4 instances. So what we are going to do is to install SQL Server 2005 on this lab 4 package 1 Windows 2008 instance. So let's remote login into this. If you are in a enterprise kind of an environment where your group policy prevents accessing legacy Windows systems like Windows 2008, you first need to log in into Windows 2019 machine and then remote login into Windows 2008. In my case, I'm lucky I don't need to indirectly access Windows 2008 instances. I can directly connect into this. So get the password, decrypt the password, and then connect using the remote desktop connection. So I'm connected into Windows 2008 machine. So like before, we are going to first capture the software. So you can start the compatibility package builder software. So we already went through this process. Select the folder that you are going to save the capture files. So let's put it into, let's say, file, make a new folder, my capture, let's say, select all. Next. So we are going to now create a baseline. We already went through this process, so I'm going fast in all of these steps. So let's go to the next step. So we are going to install the SQL Server 2005 Express Edition. So if you go into your computer and under EMP, like before, under Media, you will find SQL Server 2005 Express. So let's run this SQL Server Express installer. So you can run program, accept the license, click next, install. Go to the next step. Next. So it will do all the validation. You can ignore this ASP.NET version registration warning. Leave them as it is. Go for the next step. This is also good. Go for the next step. You need to select mixed mode authentication and then provide a password, something like leave all of them blank. Go for next and install the software. Installation is done. Let's go to the next step and click finish. So here we install the SQL Server Express Edition. We also need to apply the patch that is given here. So make sure that you run this KB installer. Click next, accept license agreement, go for next step, Express Database Services, click next, click next, click next, and install. Installation is complete. Go for the next step. Installation is done. Go for the next step and click finish. Now we have installed all the applications. The next step is to go to the run application. So these applications you don't need to run because they don't create some extra changes into the system. So when you run them, so you can safely skip this step. Having said that, you need to stop the services that is running. So if you go into the services, if you go into all programs, start SQL Server 2005, SQL Server Configuration Manager, you will see here 2 applications already running. you want to stop them because otherwise the capture process is not going to work. They keep references for the files, which prevents it copying them. So let's stop SQL Server. This is a super critical step. And also the SQL Server browser. So they will not keep open file references that prevent these files being read. So let's close this and let's now go into the next step. Everything looks good. So let's complete the capture. So these steps are similar to what we did in our lab 1. Capture process is done. Let's go for the next step. So it gives you all the files that it has created. There's no any runtime access files. That's good. Registry also, you can leave it as it is. And let's go for the next step. You need to give an application ID. So let's call it SQL Server 2005. And some ID that it automatically generates. You can leave it as it is. There's nothing to run. And then now click Package Application. So the packaging is done. Let's go for the next step. And now you need to open the package. So we know that it creates next to the capture folder. So this is the application ID that everything, all the metadata is here. So let's zip this file and then upload into an S3 bucket. In my AWS console, I already created a bucket called my EMP content that we used in our previous labs. So let's use that bucket to upload this content. So you need to start PowerShell. So you go into Amazon Web Services. You need to run Windows PowerShell for AWS. Run it as the administrator. This one you can close down safely. So once you run the PowerShell as administrator, you will still get this problem called AWS default configuration fail, so which prevents you running AWS PowerShell commandlets. To fix this, you need to set the set execution policy unrestricted. Press enter and press yes. And then you need to close this. Now, of course, go there and then start PowerShell as an administrator. Go for the folder that has that zip file. So it's in this location, cd into that. And then, of course, you are going to write S3 object. File name is the zip file name. Give it a key name, same name, bucket name, and then press enter. That will upload the file. It's always a good practice to check whether the software works on a similar operating system. So what we are going to do is to get that captured software and then install on another version Windows 2008 R2 machine. So let's log in into this package to Win 2008 instances and then try to install the captured software. So get the Windows password, decrypt it, and then connect using the remote desktop client. So I'm connected into my EC2 instance. So let's go into, let's say C drive, create a folder, SQL content. So let's go into Amazon Web Services, run this one as administrator. This will give an error. So to prevent that, you need to set the execution policy as unrestricted. Type yes, close this, and then you can load again the PowerShell window, Amazon Web Services, PowerShell for AWS. Let's run it as administrator. Like before, cd into SQL content and then read the S3 object, give the file name, key name, bucket name. So it will download this zip file into your location. Let's now unzip this content and then open the command line, and we are going to, like before, deploy the software. So to install the software, we need to say compatibility deployment. You need to deploy into, let's take the help file. So let's run this compatibility package deployment, deploy dir. Let's put it into SQL 2005. and then accept EULA. It says VSS writer cannot be started. So usually if you get this kind of an error, what we recommend is to first go and then try to look at the service section, and then here you can find under services, you have a service called SQL writer. So you have the SQL browser is there, SQL writer is here. Now it has something called start on deploy. So if you set this one to true, the service will try to start when you deploy it. What we can do is to set it to false, so the deployment will successfully continue, but the service won't start, and later we will go here and then try to debug this problem. So set this one into false, SQL writer. We know that it's a service related issue, and we know it's something to do with SQL writer, and that's why we went to services and then change that. So of course I install it, so now it's time to uninstall this again before we install. So you can type compatibility deployment -u /u to uninstall the package. This will uninstall the software. So installation is done. Let's clear the screen and let's go and then deploy again, but make sure that you don't have any log files in your 2005 directory. Right now it's an empty directory, so all good. So now the installation is done. So let's now go to our services and then try to run the SQL Server Writer service. So this is not working right now. So let's try to start this. The other services are also not working. So let's try to start this VSS writer first. So of course you get an error. The window could not start the SQL Server VSS writer service on local computer. The service did not respond to the start or control. So this message is not that useful. So usually when you try to start these services, ideally they should appear on Event Viewer. Any errors? So let's go into that and then have a look. Under applications, let's check whether there are any errors. Seems like we have an error here. The first error is activation content generation failed for, seems like it's a SQL Server program. So properly it's SQL Server Writer. And it gives this error, Microsoft VC80 ATL processor architecture AMD 664 is not going to be found. So this is related to a product issue. The issue we saw is that the product does not virtualize side-by-side assemblies in a very effective manner. There's a workaround to overcome this. It is possible to add certain files in the manifest to the location where the application is looking. You need to follow a logical thinking to understand where the problem lies. So thinking more about this issue, you must have realized that this assembly was on the source system when the package was created because the service started successfully. This means the assembly was either installed by the application or it already existed on the source server. Now, given the test server is the same OS as the source server, it is highly unlikely that the assembly is part of the OS. So this means that it was included as part of the application installer or was installed separately. This means that you can further infer that the assembly was captured during the packaging and the cause of the issue is in fact related to redirection. So let's now try to figure this problem and then fix this one on our destination server. As of now, the EMP tool does not allow you to properly virtualize what we called special kind of files called side-by-side assemblies. So how do you eliminate the possibility that this assembly was there before we start the capture process? Is to look whether this assembly is already captured in our capture file. So let's go there and then explore that. And if you carefully explore, you will find that under the folder we installed this software, under Prog Data, Windows, WinSX, there's this ATL80DLL. So the file is captured, which means that it went through as part of our installation. So very likely now the problem is that this is to do with side-by-side assembly execution problem, where the virtualization does not happen for such assemblies. You can also guess this because the folder where this assembly is called WinSSX, where you usually find these side-by-side assemblies. There are some other special folders like .NET Framework where you have similar folders. So as of now, we know this is a side-by-side assembly just by looking at this special folder. So the solution for this is to install these side-by-side assemblies separately on the host operating system. We also want to make sure that this path is properly referenced in our redirections. That's a good check to do always. For example, if you go into your installation one, you know that there is a one called redirections, and open it with Notepad++. You will find that if you look at it, you will find that this entry is there. So any request that is coming from this folder will go into this location. So the solution for this, as we said, you need to install this SQL Server Visual C++ runtime libraries. So if you go to your computer under ctemp, you will find that vc credits x64, this file that you need to install, and try to install this vscred x64 distribution. Click yes. So this will install the assemblies that is missing and that needs to be as part of the operating system instead of virtualized version. So I have installed that, and then let's try to start this service again. Go there and then start. Now this time it started perfectly and there's no any errors. So this is all good. The next step is, of course, our SQL server. The actual server is still not running. So let's try to start this. Of course, you get a similar error. So let's go and then look for Event Weaver for potential errors. So this is the error we got. Let's try to read that error. Activation context generator failed for Prog Data, this SQL Server exe, dependency assembly, this Visual C++ ATL processor architecture x86 is missing. Similar problem. But you need to look very carefully on these error messages. Even a simple ID can make a big difference. So here, remember that it says x86. So very likely it's due to not having the same assembly, but in the x86 version. So luckily for us, we have this also version of the software also available under temp folder. So what you need to do is to install this C++ distribution package, so that it will install these side-by-side assemblies in the correct location. Now it's done. So let's go into the SQL Server Express and then try to start again. It gives an error saying Windows could not start SQL Server Express on local computer. For more information, review the system event log. If this is a non-Microsoft service, contact the service vendor and refer to service specific error code, this one. Now you can search for these error codes online. So that's one approach to do that. You can copy paste this entire message and search. So as is, this one says that it should be in the event logs. Let's check whether there are any events that happen. Unfortunately for us, we don't have any errors. So this error is the one that we got previously that we already fixed. So there's no any information. So what can we do in this kind of a situation? The only solution that you have is to capture the errors from software like Process Monitor. So let's go into EMP Tools. We have this Proc Monitor. So let's run this. and then try to identify where the problem happens. So like before, let's clear the screen and then start the application. So it gives the error. Let's stop the capture. Let's go into like before, the process tree. Look for the software. In this case, it's SQL Server 2000, SQL Server EXE. So let's include filter and close it. And then you can filter based on that. So all these other filters, we don't need them. You can remove them easily. So this is the process we want. So the way we got it is we went to the process tree, went here, and then include in the filter. So you have a bunch of errors. So if you look at the filters, it's based on the process ID. We need to look for cases where it was not successful. So one possible filter you can apply is the result is not success, and apply that. So that will give you all the errors, and you can go through the list of errors that you find here. Seems like we have a couple of access denied error here. So if you look at carefully, that it says it doesn't have access to this specific path. So what is happening here is that these are like SQL Server log files, the database files. So you need to have access to them. So let's check whether the access are there. Seems like the same error. There are a couple of files that it doesn't have access to. So let's give access to this folder to the service that is running. File. So these are the things that it's not having access to. You can give like access to this entire folder, but what's the access we exactly need to give? So if you go into the properties and then security and look for these values, what you usually do is that this kind of a permission situation, you need to go and explore what is actually given in the original system and give similar access. So let's first try the name of the service. So this is the service, it's logging in as network services. So we need to give access to that network services to the right folder. So ideally you need to give it only to the log and data folders. So you can add the network services and then give the full control. I'm just giving here, but you need to match what is available on the correct on the original systems. So add one again, the network services, check services, and let's give the full control for the moment. Apply. Okay. So we added the permission that is required, that is mentioned here. So make sure that you have the SQL log, error log. So there's a one called error log. So a couple of files that it's trying to access. On MySQL log. So they're all under log folders. Access denied. So make sure that you have access to, and then we can start the service again to check whether it will work. So this time it started correctly. So we got our SQL Server running on our Windows 2008 machine. Let's now run SQL Server Manager, which is a UI tool. So when you run the SQL Server Manager, it gives an error. The error it gives is cannot connect to WMI provider. You do not have permission or the server is unreachable. Note that you can only manage SQL Server 2005 server with SQL Server Configuration Manager. So it invalid namespace. This is because WMI or Windows Management Instrumentation is exposed as COM or COM plus objects where the virtualization is not done. The DLLs related to this provider is loaded by something called a DLL host that needs to be running natively in the operating system, and these DLLs have to be registered natively on the operating systems instead of virtualizing. So let's now go through how to debug this problem using the proc monitor. Let's close this. So under, like before, C EMP tools, you have this proc monitor. Remove these filters that you have defined here. So go for the filters. We don't need any of these filters. Let's clear this for the moment. And then let's run the SQL Server Manager again. SQL Server Configuration Manager. So like before, it's going to give an error. That's all fine. All what we need to do now is to click OK and then go to process tree. Look for this SQL Server Manager that we ran a moment ago. And then you can include filter, close. And here you can filter based on the result is not successful. What we can do here is, since we have a lot of events, we can filter the path containing WMI, because we got a message saying that there's something to do with WMI. So here you can clearly see that there is some failed operations. What it's trying to do is to access these DLLs, and then there is this disallowed or file locked only with readers. So what is happening here is that it doesn't have access to these files because they don't exist as we expect. So here you can see that you have this issue like syswow wmi util.dll.mui. So let's try to figure this out. If you search the root of this location where we install SQL Server, which is C 2005 to SQL Server 2005, for any file called MOF file, you'll find that there is a MOF file called SQL provider xpsp2up MOF file. So this is the provider registration file that we need to register by executing few commands. So when you get an error like what we got a moment ago, it's always a good idea to go there and then learn a few basics about how Windows operating system works. So we already know that we got a message saying WMI, which stands for Windows Management Instrumentation. So if I'm you, I would go there and then learn about Windows Management Instrumentation. So that's a way that certain APIs are exposed to or certain shared APIs are exposed in Windows environment. And in this article, for example, you can see how to register a provider, which we are missing in this case when you try to run the application. And if you search about that, you will find that there is a program called mofcomp that you can use to register these providers. So what I'm going to do is to execute this command to register the provider that is required by SQL Server. Open command line, and then we are going to call this mofcomp. We are then going to call mofcomp, and we are going to give the location of this file, which is where we install this. So it's going to be, this is where I install this or deploy this software. So under that you have this mof file. So let's register it natively in the operating system. So that's SQL MGM provider XP MOF. Press enter. So that has registered the MOF file, but it still needs the DLLs to function. So we need to register the DLL also. We also need to register the DLL that provides these functionality, so that the DLL is in here, SQL MGM provider.dll. So let's register that also. So it's not only the MOF file that you need to register, but also the implementation of that, which is in this case SQL managed provider. So to do that, you do reg svr32 service, and then you need to give the name of that file, the DLL SQL MGM provider.dll. Press enter. So the registration is successful. So this is all good, but if you go and then try to run this program again, you will find that the program starts, but you can find that the SQL server is not running, or it's not visible at all. So the DLL registration is done. Having said that, when we run this, the WMI provider, which is a native Windows process, is still not running under the virtualization that we are doing. So we want to make sure that the WMI provider also running under that. So for example, if you open your Process Explorer, you will find that there are some WMI provider which usually comes under this name, WMI PRVSC. So this exe, when it is running, has to run under our special process, or under our special virtualization technology. So to do that, what we are going to do is to use a registry trick where you can configure Windows environments in a way that every time exe runs, you can set up a debugger that will run behind the scene. Let's go into the regedit to start the registry editor. So once you have the registry editor, if you go into local machine, software, Microsoft, and then go into Windows NT, under current version, there is a folder called image file execution options. So what this allows you to do is to start a debugger or some background process while these processes are running. So what I'm going to do is to add a new entry with the name of the exe, so that we can kickstart our debugger while that exe is running. So let's add a new entry here. So it's new entry. We are going to add a key. So you need to name it with the name of the exe. So that's going to be wmiprvsc.exe. So that's what the DLL host that will run behind the scene. Once you add that, you need to add a new entry, a string value called debugger, and then type the value for that. So we need to provide the location of this compatibility package engine exe and set the working folder also. So if you go into your computer C drive, we need to check where we install this. So it's under SQL Server 5, this folder. So package runner is here, engine. So this exe, so it's in here. So you need to provide this folder path. And the working directory is also going to be like this. So this is all good. So what I have done here is I created the entry where my location of my debug is. In this case, it's going to be compatibility package engine.exe. So that's what we want to kickstart when that exe is running. And we also set the working directory to this folder. So this is where we install this compatibility package related artifacts. So let's copy this and then set the debugger to that value and click OK. So what will happen is when this WMI provider SC is running, it will kickstart this process. So let's now run the SQL Server Configuration Manager. All looks good. And you can even see now the SQL Server available. You can see that they are appearing. We can start the SQL Server here. And now it's also running. So we managed to get our SQL Server Configuration Manager working by registering the missing WMI providers and also adding the right DLLs, and then configuring the virtualization engine to start when this WMI provider or DLL host is running. Now it's very important to know, like, this kind of advanced debugging rarely happens in most of the application. This is to give you an idea around the level of configurations that you can make with this software. By all chance, if you face a hard to debug issue, you need to contact your partner development manager and then express certain things that you need to get it working. But 99% of the software that you are dealing with, especially the legacy enterprise-y kind of application, you may not go through this kind of advanced configuration. Now remember, SQL software is advanced software where it uses all the configurations like WMI providers, some Windows features. But in legacy applications that you normally find, you may not encounter these kind of advanced issues where I need to debug. We executed a few manual steps. Obviously, you may ask, do I need to do these manual steps in my final distribution package? The answer is no. You can automate all these manual steps by using two XML files. One is deployment script XML, the other one is app registry XML file. So this includes, in this lab series, for example, things like installation of Visual C++ redistributables, installation of SQL Server Management MOF files, registration of SQL Server Management DLL, and also creation of the debugger registry entry for WMI. So these two files are available in the location that you unzip the content. So there's a file called app registry, and there's another XML file called deployment script XML. So when you package it in the app registry, for example, you can specify what entries goes into the registry, and in the deployment script you can specify what programs that you need to run. So if you can run some programs with the help of this, sky is the limit of different changes that you can make to the operating system. You can install the redistributable packages. You can run some commands to install the MOF files and also the DLLs.